orders.
Hello and welcome to the first public upload on my YouTube channel in 5 years. Yeah, it's been quite a while, and if you've been subscribed to my channel, then, well, you probably just found out that you're still subscribed to my channel. You can unsubscribe if you want, don't expect too many uploads in the future. This is just sort of a one-off video because I got a Steam Deck, and one of the first things I of course wanted to try is if my most played game runs on it under Linux. And that game would be World of Warships that you can see right here. So in this video, basically, I'll be showing you one match in the game, then I'll be talking about the control setup that I'm using, the graphics settings and performance, battery life, as well as basically how I got the Wargaming Game Center version of the game to run, a rough guide for that. So yeah, first we'll have the gameplay here. As you can see, this is a game in the Tier 8 Pan-Asian cruiser Harbin, since that's what I'm grinding right now. And it starts off a little slow, but if you skip a bit further towards the end, there is a quite funny situation that basically represents the ideal situation you can get into with this ship. So that part does end up being quite entertaining. Now I do have to apologize, the gameplay portion of the video will be slightly out of focus, so you might not be able to read all of the text there, but I think if you have a basic knowledge of the game, you should be able to at least follow the match and perhaps get some enjoyment out of that situation that unfolds towards the end. So yeah, World of Warships on Steam Deck. As you can see, it really runs perfectly fine. And of course the other question is, how does it control? And I can fortunately tell you that with all of the input methods available on the Steam Deck, you can actually get one single control scheme that works quite well for all classes of ships, yeah, even carriers and I guess submarines. I haven't really tested it, but in theory it should work. And this control setup shouldn't limit you too much in how you play, so you can still do most of the things you'd want to do, like double tap the map button to get a view of an island or something. But that'll be something I'll discuss in more detail in the next part of the video. So for now, we just have this gameplay. You can see I'm even able to hit a destroyer at like 10 kilometers with these fairly slow shells. So, I guess before I just leave you with the gameplay, I will discuss some of the issues that you might experience with trying to run the game on Linux. Yeah, for the most part it just works with some small issues. So basically the first issue you'll experience is that on startup you'll get a DXDiag warning message that you have to click away within a couple of seconds, otherwise the game will just freeze on the loading screen. The next issue is one you can actually see in this video, and that's the mouse cursor. The mouse cursor likes to disappear when it shouldn't and appear also when it shouldn't. In this case, you're seeing the mouse cursor be visible from time to time when it really should be hidden. But in the menus you can have the opposite problem of the mouse cursor being invisible when you want it to be visible. Now fortunately for most of the menu stuff you can just use the touch screen, and then it doesn't become too problematic, but it can be a little annoying, especially if you want to change the minimap settings in-game. The probably most annoying issue though is something that happens in maybe like 20% of all games, and that's a frame rate issue where every time you move the camera, the frame rate will just like tank to like 20 FPS with frame time spikes like up to 80 milliseconds. And it becomes quite annoying. You will have to restart the game to get rid of it, but as I said, it only happens in like 20% of games, or it only starts happening in 20% of games. So most of the time it's not an issue, and you can still fortunately just about play the game, since this is a fairly slow-paced game that doesn't require too good reaction times. It's just going to be quite annoying. But yeah, that's pretty much all of the issues that I've experienced with running the game on Linux so far. So I'll just leave you with the gameplay here, and then you'll hear me again in the other sections of the video that you can skip to just by using the chapters, which are also in the description of the video. So enjoy the game, and I'll be back later.
destroyer sighted.
Smoke screen set.
The enemy team has taken the lead.
Enemy destroyer detected.
Enemy submarine spotted.
Enemy cruiser sunk.
Enemy battleship sighted. Enemy destroyer detected.
Torpedoes to port.
Detected.
Main turret critically damaged.
We've destroyed an enemy battleship.
Smoke generator started. Smoke screen set.
Enemy battleship foundered. Battle ends in 5 minutes.
So in this part of the video I'll be going over the control setup that I'm using in the game. You can see a quick summary of all the controls here, but let's just go over all the buttons and sticks. So the most basic stuff, movement and camera movement, is of course done with the left and right analog sticks. I have set up the left analog stick in such a way that it's sort of split into 4 regions with no overlap between the regions. So that means that you can't like accelerate and go left at the same time. Each of those is really a separate action, because I noticed that if I have it set up sort of as like a D-pad where you can combine, say, up and right, I would frequently make like accidental speed changes whenever I wanted to steer, and this setup avoids that. So right stick is camera movement. I can press the left stick to honk my horn, and the right stick click is currently used for switching cameras. So if I were to zoom in on my turrets and press the right stick, I can switch between the turret views. Then I guess onto the triggers and bumpers. So the left trigger is my free look button, so that's effectively the right mouse button. And the right trigger is of course for shooting stuff. So we have this destroyer here, and there you go. Then the left bumper is for toggling the zoom view, so the shift key effectively. And the right bumper I use as the control key, so I can bring up the mouse and, for example, change some minimap settings. You will see here that using the mouse can be a bit, well, not ideal in battle, especially if you try to combine it with the right stick. I find that actually using the touchscreen usually kind of works better, and sometimes you also have issues where the mouse will just disappear. But in a pinch it will usually do so. For example, if I want to select a target here for secondaries, that does work fairly consistently. It's mostly just this minimap setting stuff that's an issue. So then I guess next up, the D-pad. The D-pad is my basically my consumable activation stuff. So I have this all set up in a clockwise direction. Basically, the up button is R, so the first consumable, the right button is T, the second consumable, down is Y, left is U, so on. And since, well, this ship, for example, the Condor, has 5 consumables, the final consumable slot is on the L4 button. So you can see here, if I want to activate Reload Booster, I can press the L4 button, or if I want Speed Booster, I press down on the D-pad. It's all here. Then I guess I'll move on to the left touchpad. Now both touchpads I have set up to sort of act as 4 extra buttons, because this game really requires a lot of different buttons. And the left touchpad is sort of my ship status, I guess, control center. So the left action here is for toggling the anti-aircraft guns on and off. The right direction I can use to set the priority AA sector. Downwards I can hold to display the ship info, so that's basically the H button. And up is the quick command menu, so the B button. And you can just move the mouse over some command and then let go, and you'll get the corresponding action. So I guess I already mentioned the L4 button for the 5th consumable slot, but the L5 button is what I use to toggle the minimap, or toggle the map view. So that's basically the M key. Then I guess one thing I could still mention with the left stick, oh dear, get away, well, good enough. Guess you get to see me using the damage control consumable. But the left stick, these are touch sensitive sticks, so if I just touch the surface I can use gyroscope controls to get a bit more, well, you can aim precisely much faster than just using the right stick if you combine it with gyroscope controls. However, if I don't want to use the gyroscope, I can just not touch that stick and it'll just be the right stick controlling the camera. Okay, so now onto the, I guess I'll just do the start and select buttons. So these are pretty simple. The select button is basically the tab key, so I can see the list of ships in the battle, and the start button is the escape key. Now, I guess onto the, I'll do the right back buttons now. So those are basically my scroll buttons. There are quite a few cases where you do actually need to scroll, especially in the menus, but also if the zoom view isn't quite what you want. So I have L4 for zooming in and L5 for zooming out. Then let's do the right touchpad next. So this is basically my weapon selection, and just like with the consumables, this is set up in a clockwise order. So I have 1 at the top, 2 at the right, 3 at the bottom, and 4 at the left. And yeah, that's basically all of those weapon systems, except there is sometimes one more. So if you have a ship that has the depth charges but not the depth charge airstrike, then that's usually bound to the G key, and since submarines are bad, I have that bound to the B button. But of course on this ship we do have the depth charge airstrike, so I don't get to show that here. So that basically just leaves X, Y, and A. The A button is basically the F key, so on, for example, this super ship, I can select the fire mode down here with the A button. Then the X button is for, well, it's really just the X key on the keyboard as well, so I can select or switch the lock-on target with that button, because sometimes the automated system isn't ideal there. And then finally the Y button, if I shoot very far, that allows me to follow the shells, because sometimes you do want to see where your shells are going. And, well, actually there is still one more button that I have that's pretty optional, but hey. So if I hold down the right trackpad, that will effectively press the J key, and if I combine that with the control key, so the right bumper, I can hide the interface. So hey, now I get a nicer view. But yeah, that's pretty optional, but since this hold action was still available and it doesn't really interfere with weapon selection, I just thought, hey, I can add that. So yeah, that's pretty much all the controls. There are some things that you may want to change in the game settings to make the controls also work a little bit better. So in the controls section, basically the things you want to change is the aircraft controls, since those are bound to WASD, and you'll probably want to be setting the rudder position rather than holding the left stick left and right with the A and D keys. So I have the left stick effectively bound to QWES. So of course the plane controls by default are WASD, which would mean that you can't steer your planes left and right other than by making these slight camera adjustments. So you'll want to bind the plane steering to Q and E for left and right turns. The same issue is also there with the spectator mode. Fortunately, that's also a separate setting from like the regular ship controls, so you'll basically just want to scroll all the way down in the control section. Yeah, it's all the way down here at camera settings. So left and right, you'll want to bind those to Q and E, and you'll want to move camera to target object. You want to set that to something other than space, because the space key isn't mapped. So I have that set to F right now. And that will then give you full control over the spectator mode. So I guess now let's talk about performance and battery life. First of all, battery life, I guess. I have set up a rather demanding training room here with 10 Schlieffens each team and 2 carriers for some special AA effects, fireworks and stuff. And let's just have a look at the wattage counter there and battery life first. So I guess we'll have to wait for some battles to take place, but you can already see that the power usage with a 40 FPS cap and the game settings that I'm currently using is in the neighborhood of like 13 or so, maybe 15 watts at most. So that would mean that battery life should be better than, well, that's about maybe 2.5 hours at least. And that's of course only counting in-game time and not the time in menus, although the port will be quite demanding as well. So yeah, here we have a bunch going on, and as you can see, we're now in the neighborhood of 15 watts, maybe even 16 watts. But this is of course with an FPS, well, with the screen set to 40 Hz and VSync enabled. So if I turn the refresh rate up to 60 Hz, and there the screen has updated, and now we go into the settings and turn off VSync. This will of course increase power usage all the way up to the maximum, but well, you can see that we're still in like the neighborhood of 40 to 60 FPS in this case. So right now actually in the high 50s, which is pretty good, but from my experience it will usually drop below this during battles. However, you're still getting way over 30 FPS, and I think in this game the frame rate doesn't matter too much. So basically the game runs just fine, and as you can hopefully also see, this is with basically all the visual effects at least enabled at some quality. Not the highest quality, but I mean, can you really tell on this screen size? Probably not. You have the pretty water, you have trees on the islands, lighting's at least pretty decent looking, and ships are suitably detailed even at a distance. Now I have reduced some of the settings, for example like shadow quality and stuff, more to like medium quality settings, as well as like draw distance stuff as well, and maybe foliage as well. Because this is like the kind of stuff that you just won't really notice on a screen of this size. So now if we go into the settings and take a closer look, you can see here texture quality high, shadow quality medium, sea rendering quality very high, reflections more in the medium to low range, but at least they are enabled. Foliage medium, and then more the effect stuff I've mostly set to high. Yeah. And I guess sound quality I've also set to ultra. Not sure how much of a performance difference that really makes. But yeah, as you can see, performance is really just fine. Okay, I was wondering why my torpedo, my skip bombers weren't launching, but yeah, that works as well. So I guess let's take a look at these bots fighting it out. So yeah, it's quite a lot going on right now, but we're still in at least the high 30s, and hey, this performance really isn't too bad. But I guess as you can also see that if I have the frame rate fully uncapped, then power usage is well above 20 watts, and that's not going to be ideal for battery life. I mean, I've been using this on battery for a little bit already, so my battery's at just under 90%, and it's showing the 1 hour 40s of battery life. But if I go back into the settings, enable VSync, the system-wide frame rate limit doesn't really seem to work in this game from my experience. So if I try to set this to 30, okay, actually now it is working, but from my experience it hasn't been very consistent, so I just keep it off, because the in-game one works just fine in this case. And now I set the frame rate, the refresh rate back to 40 Hz, and yeah, now we're dropping back down into the 15 watt region. So battery life is pretty okay that way. Yeah. Wow, that's a lot going on in that log. So the final question to answer is, how do you actually install the game? Now, if you're using the Steam version, it's probably pretty obvious. You just go into the library, install the game, and hopefully that works. I haven't tested it myself. But as you can see here, I am using the Wargaming Game Center version of the game, and getting it to run was perhaps a bit weird. It might be simple, and I can't give you perhaps the definitive guide, but I can sort of tell you how I eventually got it working. So first off, you'll want to switch to desktop mode. And of course download the Wargaming Game Center installer for World of Warships from the World of Warships website. In the Discovery app, you'll want to have Wine and Lutris installed, and you'll first want to try out just going into Lutris, and there should be, yeah, if you click the plus button up here, you can search for the Lutris website for installers and enter, well, Wargaming. Okay, so here we have the Wargaming Game Center. You'll want to click on that and install. And to be honest, this actually didn't seem to work for me. However, there is a trick how you can still sort of get it to work. So once you click install, the Game Center should show up in your list of games in Lutris, but it might not actually be installed. However, what you can do if that happens to you is install the Game Center via Wine. So you basically just well, if you have Wine installed, the exe should just run with Wine if you try to run it. And then it will be installed in Home, I think, is it Wine, Drive C, Program Data, and there'll be like a Wargaming Game Center folder in there. And you'll want to move this to the Lutris install folder, which I think by default is just Home Games. You'll have created a Wargaming Game Center folder, then Drive C, Program Data, so this is the virtual C drive for Lutris, and then you'll want to copy that wargaming.net folder from the Wine virtual Drive C to this Lutris virtual Drive C. And then once you run it from Lutris, it should just work, at least the Game Center part. I did have some issues, and this is probably the most significant issue you might encounter, that the game will just not launch properly, so it will just freeze during the loading screen. And what worked for me is I click down here, then on Configure for the Game Center, and in Runner options you'll want to have the Wine version set to System 7.0 and not this Lutris FShack 7.2 whatever. At least that version for me, it just led to the game freezing on startup and I couldn't get past it. But yeah, once you have all that set up, you should just be able to hit play here. If you want to launch the game from game mode, which you probably will to get your custom control scheme, you just add Lutris as a non-Steam game to Steam, and then you can start it from game mode. But yeah, you can see here, Wargaming Game Center in Linux. That works just fine. And whoops, what happened there? Okay, I guess it doesn't always just work fine, but it mostly works just fine, other than some glitches. And yeah, I can hit play here. Now, when you start the game, you will usually get this DXDiag message, and you'll want to click that away within like a couple of seconds, otherwise the game will once again freeze during this loading screen. But let's quit out of this because I don't really have the controls to actually control the game here in desktop mode. But yeah, hopefully these instructions do get the game working for you via Game Center. If not, I guess just keep trying stuff. I can't really help anymore beyond that. It did eventually work for me, and hopefully if you're trying to do this as well, it works for you too.
Maschinenboost aktiviert.
Gegnerische Schlachtschiff entdeckt.
einen gegnerischen Zerstörer versenkt.
Das ist ein guter. Unser Team hat die Führung übernommen.
Maschinenboost deaktiviert. Torpedos voraus. Alle Stationen, melde Position eines strategischen Ziels. Torpedos direkt voraus. Maschinenboost aktiviert.
Unser Sieg ist in Sicht.
Problem gelöst. Feueralarm. Hauptturm kritisch beschädigt. Gegnerischer Zerstörer gesunken. Gutes Spiel allesamt.